inspiring leader who earned the loyalty of his soldiers, yet the resentment of a political elite. Loyal warrior whose devotion was constantly questioned. Brilliant tactician and strategist whom many dismissed as reckless. A mind capable of understanding entire civilizations through their art alone, yet one that could never truly grasp politics. Mitth'raw'nuruodo, Thrawn, senior captain of the Ascendency, Grand Admiral of a galactic empire, and without a doubt, one of the greatest military minds in galactic history. A genius with few equals. Today we ask a simple question. What would Thrawn think of the Tau Empire? Before we begin, remember to like, comment, subscribe, ring the bell, the whole shtick. You know what to do. If you can, support me through Patreon, and if you would be so kind, donate to the Star Wars x Warhammer 40k art budget on Ko-fi. It's thanks to your continuous support this series has its own art gallery, free of AI slop. All links are in the description below. With that out of the way, let's begin. Let's start by answering the question posed by this video. What would Thrawn think of the Tau Empire? The answer is simple. He would be impressed. Thrawn values structure, order, competence, and creativity, all qualities that Tau possess in abundance. Their society is highly organized, meritocratic, and built around rewarding ability above all else. In both technology and warfare, they consistently demonstrate ingenuity without sacrificing reliability. There is a reason why they survived in the brutal Milky Way of the 41st millennium, despite controlling only a tiny fraction of the galaxy. Another aspect of Thrawn that is often overlooked is that, unlike most of the Chiss, he does not dismiss other civilizations out of hand. Certainly, he shares some of the Ascendancy's cultural arrogance, which are, after all, a deeply supremacist society that views outsiders are inherently inferior. Yet, Thrawn is different. Rather than rejecting alien cultures, he studies them. He is fascinated by their history, their values, and above all, their art. I imagine he would find the Tau Empire's ability to unite dozens of species under a single political system genuinely remarkable. Such coexistence is extraordinarily rare in the unknown regions, where civilizations are far more isolated and distrustful of one another. Likewise, he would respect the Tau military. While insignificant by the standards of the Warhammer 40k galaxy, it is exceptionally powerful force by the standards of a Star Wars galaxy. And honestly, I could end the video here. I don't think there is much value in speculating about what Thrawn would think of every caste or every member species of the Tau Empire. A mind as analytical as his deserves a discussion of its own for each subject. So, you may be wondering, what is the rest of the video actually about? Simple. Mitth'raw'nuruodo is, above all else, a military commander. As he himself once said, all opponents are not necessarily enemies. Both enemies and opponents carry certain characteristics in common. Both perceive their opposite as an obstacle or an opportunity or a threat. That quote naturally leads to far more interesting question. Would Thrawn see the Tau Empire as an opponent or as an enemy? I believe the answer is clear. He would see them as an enemy, one that would eventually have to be confronted. And that conclusion remains the same in almost every scenario. Thrawn would immediately recognize the Tau's greatest strength, their potential. He would see how rapidly they grow, how efficiently they expand through diplomacy as well as military force, and how adept they are at subverting local governments and winning populations to their cause. He would also recognize the growing effectiveness of their armed forces. As a senior captain of the Chiss Ascendency, he would view them as a long-term threat to his people, and with good reason. The Tau are relentlessly expansionist. The philosophy of a greater good demands continual expansion, whether through diplomacy or conquest. They may advance patiently, but they never stop advancing. While the Tau and the Chiss could certainly become allies in the short term, Thrawn would understand that such an alliance would only be temporary. Eventually, the Tau would reach the borders of Ascendency, and when they did, they would seek to bring the Chiss into the greater good. Sergeant Atramax of the Raptors in the Elemental Council by Noah Van Nguyen summarizes the danger posed by the Tau remarkably well.
Are you aware, my battle brothers, mock the idea of your empire clawing its way to greatness, as if all we need do is master a fraction of our strength and crush you, as if that were so simple a task. The Imperium's blessed war machine is a diseased giant, not easily stirred. Your empire is a dynamo of conquest. Unchallenged, you will set your ambitions on the realm of Ultramar, or even the holy sanctuary of Segmentum Solar. Your significance is not the threat you pose today, it is the threat you pose in 10,000 years.
This is a threat that most factions and most individuals in Warhammer 40k Galaxy fail to recognize. They constantly underestimate the Tau, and to be fair, they have understandable reasons for doing so. Compared to the ancient powers of the galaxy, the Tau are children. Barely a few thousand years old, they control only a handful of star systems by galactic standards, but Thrawn and the Chiss Ascendency don't have that luxury. The Chiss are an ancient civilization, perhaps the oldest and certainly one of the most stable in the unknown regions, or chaos as they call it. Over the millennia, they have watched countless civilizations rise and fall. Yet, despite their age, the Ascendency possesses only 28 colonized worlds. 28 planets to call their own. The Tau Empire, by comparison, controlled at least 100 worlds before the Damocles Gulf Crusade. Afterward, they expanded dramatically, colonizing countless more. Some estimates even suggests that by the early 42nd millennium, the Tau Empire rivals or has surpassed the realm of Ultramar, the legendary realm of 500 worlds. In other words, the Chiss simply cannot afford to dismiss the Tau, Neither would Thrawn. To the Ascendency, the Tau would represent far more than a military threat. They would be an ideological one. The Chiss control a compact, highly developed realm, precisely the sort of civilization the Tau would seek to incorporate into the greater good. And even if we view Thrawn in his later role as Grand Admiral of a galactic empire, I believe he would still be one of the very few Imperial leaders to recognize that danger. Tarkin would likely dismiss the Tau outright, confident that the overwhelming size of the Imperial Navy and the fear inspired by his doctrine would deter them from ever challenging the Empire. Darth Vader placed his faith in the power of the Force above all else. I doubt a technologically advanced but non-psychic civilization would leave much of an impression on him. Even Emperor Palpatine, despite his extraordinary intelligence, would probably view the Tau as little more than a nuisance. Their empire would appear insignificant beside his own galactic dominion. After all, for all his brilliance, he underestimated the Rebel Alliance. So no, I don't believe most Imperial leaders would take the Tau seriously. Everyone except Thrawn. He would see what they could become. Would the Galactic Empire defeat the Tau in the conventional war? Absolutely. The Empire commands the resources of an entire galaxy through overwhelming industrial capacity, and the sheer numbers alone, it would eventually crush the Tau. But Thrawn would ask a different question. At what cost? That is where Star Wars differs fundamentally from Warhammer 40k. In 41st Millennium, casualties are almost a currency. In Star Wars, they matter. At this point, you might be thinking, the Empire has Coruscant, core worlds, and trillions upon trillions of citizens. Surely, manpower isn't the issue. And you'd be right. That's not the consequence I'm talking about. I'm talking about morale. Think about it. The Clone Wars, the greatest military conflict the galaxy had experienced in 1,000 years, one that unquestionably eclipsed the Galactic Civil War, wasn't fought by the citizens of the Republic. It was fought by the clones and droids. Yes, there were planetary defense forces and volunteer militias, but the overwhelming majority of the galaxy's population never fought on the front lines. That changed with the rise of a galactic empire. Palpatine built a true citizen army and sent it out to crush the remaining separatist holdouts. The campaign to pacify the Outer Rim lasted nearly 2 years. And even then, the clones remained the backbone of the Imperial military. In many ways, Palpatine threw them into a meat grinder to eliminate the last generation of clone soldiers, while replacing them with a conventional military. Now imagine that same military fighting the Tau Empire. It wouldn't be pretty. The Tau have repeatedly proven themselves capable of defeating veteran regiments of the Imperial Guard. The closest equivalent 40k has to Imperial Army and Stormtrooper Corps. The difference is that the Galactic Empire lacks anything comparable to the Adeptus Astartes. The few super soldier units they possessed were even more limited in scale and power than Astartes chapters. Nor does it possess the centuries-old regimental traditions, combat experience, and institutional knowledge that many Imperial Guard formations bring to the battlefield. I'm not even mentioning something like Imperial Knights or Titan Legios, the same applies in space. An Imperial-class Star Destroyer is a terrifying warship by Star Wars standards. In Warhammer 40k, it would barely qualify as an escort. Yes, enough escorts can destroy even a battleship. History has shown that more than once, but the losses are usually severe. And any campaign against the Tau would only become more costly the deeper Imperial forces pushed into Tau space. Since the Damocles Gulf Crusade, even the Imperium has never attempted a major assault against the Tau core septs. Only the Orcs and the Tyranids have reached that far, and both were ultimately driven back. A war against the Tau would become an enormous drain on Imperial resources. One that could even delay projects as important as the Death Star. And that's before considering the forces still needed to suppress separatist holdouts and contain the growing rebel movement. Imagine how much stronger those rebel cells would become if a significant portion of the Imperial military were tied down fighting the Tau instead. Most Imperial officers would dismiss that possibility. Thrawn wouldn't. He would immediately understand that a prolonged war of conquest would create opportunities for every one of the Empire's enemies. At the same time, he would quickly recognize the Watercast for what they are: patient, highly skilled diplomats capable of undermining Imperial authority without firing a shot. Simply ignoring the Tau wouldn't be an option either. So, a prolonged war is unacceptable. Peaceful coexistence is dangerous. What then is the solution? Thrawn would exploit the Tau's greatest strength: their patience. Rather than pursuing a long campaign of conquest, he would seek a short, decisive conflict, concentrate overwhelming force against a single objective, demonstrate beyond any doubt that continued war is futile, hold every other front defensively, then negotiate, not a surrender, a peace treaty, one backed by a strict non-aggression pact or even mutual isolation. The Tau would hardly be pleased with such an outcome. But they are patient. Patient enough to wait 10 or 20 or even 30 years before trying again. And that would give the Empire the one resource it desperately needs: time. By the time that timer runs out and the Tau were free to resume their expansion, the Galactic Empire would no longer exist. It would have fractured into the competing realms of ambitious warlords, each claiming to be the rightful heir to the Empire. But that failure would not be Thrawn's. The Empire was doomed long before he ever pledged his loyalty to it. The ambitions of the Sith had already sealed its fate. But what about the Chiss Ascendency? Earlier, I argued that the Tau would pose an even greater threat to the Ascendency than they would to the Galactic Empire. At first glance, the Chiss possess two important advantages. The first is geography. The unknown regions, or chaos as the Chiss call them, are notoriously difficult to navigate. Any large-scale invasion would be slow, complicated, and logistically demanding. The second is the Tau themselves. Unlike many powers in Warhammer 40k, they generally prefer diplomacy before conquest. Both of these factors would buy Thrawn something invaluable: time. But I don't believe even he could save the Ascendency from eventual annexation. The greatest obstacle to Thrawn wouldn't be the Tau, it would be the Chiss themselves. The Ascendency has extraordinarily strict rules governing diplomacy and relations with outsiders. No permanent alliances, no preemptive wars. The Ascendency stands alone. Throughout the Thrawn Ascendency trilogy, Thrawn repeatedly bends or outright breaks those principles. He seeks allies when necessary and takes a decisive action against emerging threats, believing that rigid doctrine must sometimes give way to practical necessity. And what is his reward? Exile. After everything he accomplished for the Ascendency, after the victories he won, after forcing the Grisk back into the shadows, he was stripped of his rank and cast out. There is a certain irony in that. The Tau may well be the single most dangerous opponent the Chiss Ascendency could ever face. Not because they are the strongest, but because they are the most patient. They are perfectly willing to spend decades building alliances, expanding their influence through diplomacy, trade, economic dependence, and, only when necessary, military conquest. The Chiss would reject every offer, every treaty, every proposal for closer cooperation. But what would that defiance be worth when the Ascendency eventually found itself surrounded by the Tau Empire and its allies? Just as he did against the Grisk, I believe Thrawn could delay the inevitable. He could slow the Tau's advance. He could buy precious years, but he could not stop them. Just as with the Galactic Empire, all he could truly offer his people was time. And it would not be Thrawn's fault that the leaders of both civilizations choose to waste it. It's ironic, really. The greatest military mind in galactic history, and in the end, none of his victories would matter. Not because he lacked the intelligence to recognize the threat, not because he lacked the skill to defeat it, but because those above him would fail to make use of the one thing he could give them: time. And that has always been Thrawn's greatest tragedy. His genius was never the problem. The people who commanded him were. So, that's my answer to the question posed at the beginning of this video. What would Thrawn think of the Tau Empire? He would admire them, he would respect them, and above all else, he would recognize them as a threat long before anyone else did. But that isn't the end of the story, because there is another Tau faction that I believe Thrawn would approach very differently. The Farsight Enclaves. A small breakaway state led by perhaps the greatest military commander the Tau have ever produced, Commander Farsight, also known as Oshowa. So, if you'd like to see how I think Thrawn would interact with the far side enclaves, and with Oshowa himself. Be sure to join me in the next video. I'm also cooking something special for the channel anniversary, so wait for that as well. If you enjoyed this video, please like, comment, subscribe and ring that bell. If you're able, support me through Patreon to help keep my electricity running, or donate to Ko-fi art budget for Star Wars X Warhammer 40k series. I extend special thanks to the highest tier supporters on Patreon: S.A., Michael Pellison, Josh Travis, Cell, Scary Stopvat, Psab, Riz9, Seragusta, Boromir117, Heimko, and Glitch. You're all truly wonderful. Thank you for joining me, and I hope you enjoyed. Now, my dear viewers and listeners, remember, wherever you are, whatever you do, try to enjoy yourself while you can. I wish you most heretical day. Ta-ta!